Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we're sailing into the world of pirate legends. Not the polished world of storybooks, but the stranger history behind them. Pirates were not only sea thieves, they were sailors shaped by war, empire, poverty, and opportunity. Their lives were dangerous, but their world was more organized than many people imagine. Tonight, we'll explore the truth behind the flags, the captains, the ships, and the stories that refused to disappear. Some legends began with real battles. Others grew from fear before a single cannon fired. The history of piracy is full of surprises. It reaches far beyond buried treasure. It carries us into lawless harbours, tense sea routes, and the minds of people who chose the edge of the known world. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is settle in. Let your shoulders relax. Allow your breathing to slow. And as the day begins to fade, join me as we explore the hidden world of pirate legends together. Let's begin. Pirates built their legends by terrifying enemies before a fight began. Fear was one of their most effective weapons. A merchant captain did not always know the strength of the ship bearing down on him, but he knew what might happen if he resisted. Pirates understood this perfectly. Their reputation traveled ahead of them through sailors' gossip, printed notices, tavern stories, and the shaken testimony of survivors. A crew that seemed merciless could win without firing a cannon, because surrender protected cargo, sails, rigging, and lives on both sides. This was not random cruelty. It was a calculated performance designed to make resistance feel pointless. A flag, a sudden chase, a deck full of armed men, and a captain known for brutality could turn courage into panic within minutes. The most successful pirates were not always the strongest in battle. They were the ones who made other sailors imagine the battle before it happened. In that moment, legend became strategy, and fear became a kind of currency. The Jolly Roger was designed to make ships surrender instantly. A pirate flag was not just decoration. It was a message delivered across open water at the most frightening moment possible. Many crews sailed under ordinary colors until they were close enough to prevent escape. Then the false flag came down and the dark signal went up. That sudden reveal could change everything. Sailors on the target ship knew they had only moments to decide whether to fight or yield. The images varied from crew to crew. Some showed skulls. Some showed weapons. Some suggested death, time running out, or violence about to begin. These designs were simple because they had to be read from a distance, through spray, wind, and panic. The purpose was psychological speed. A surrendered ship could be taken with less damage, and that meant more profit for the attackers. The flag turned reputation into a visible threat. It said that the chase was over and that hesitation might be costly. Blackbeard turned his own appearance into a weapon of legend. Edward Teach understood that a pirate captain could become more frightening than his weapons. Accounts describe him entering battle with a thick black beard, a chest full of pistols, and slow-burning fuses tucked under his hat. Those smoking coils would have curled around his face in a haze that made him seem almost unreal. Whether every detail was exaggerated or not, the effect was unforgettable. He wanted enemies to see him before they judged his strength. He wanted them unsettled before the first strike. In an age when superstition, rumor, and fear shaped life at sea, appearance mattered. A terrifying figure on deck could make a merchant crew imagine the worst and surrender faster. His career as a major pirate was brief, but the image endured for centuries. He became proof that legend can be built with theatre as much as violence. The man died in battle, but the mask he created never really did. Many pirates were skilled sailors before they became outlaws. A pirate ship could not function with amateurs. It needed people who knew ropes, weather, steering, repairs, tides, and the strange discipline of living at sea. Many who joined pirate crews had already worked on merchant vessels, naval ships, fishing craft, or privateering voyages. They understood how to reef sails in sudden wind. They knew how to keep a hull moving when food was low and the crew was exhausted. This experience mattered because piracy was not simply attacking ships. It was navigation, maintenance, negotiation, scouting, escape, and survival across long stretches of ocean. The skills that empires depended on also made piracy possible. Some sailors turned outlaw after harsh treatment, low wages, wartime unemployment, or the chance to claim a larger share of plunder. Their decision may have been desperate, bold, or opportunistic, but it was rarely made from ignorance. The sea had already trained them, and piracy gave those hard-earned skills a dangerous new purpose. Pirate crews often voted on leaders and shared treasure by agreement. Life aboard many pirate ships was more organized than the legends suggest. Before a voyage, crews often accepted written or spoken rules that explained shares, punishments, duties, and compensation for injuries. Captains mattered most during pursuit and battle, when quick command could decide survival. At other times, their power could be limited by the crew and balanced by another officer. This arrangement was striking because ordinary sailors on naval and merchant vessels often endured harsh discipline with little say. Among pirates, a captain who acted foolishly, hoarded goods, or lost confidence could be removed. Plunder was divided according to rank and role, but the system usually promised ordinary crewmen a defined portion. That did not make piracy noble. It was still violent theft at sea. Yet within that dangerous world, pirate crews created agreements that felt surprisingly practical. Their rules helped hold unstable groups together when trust was scarce and betrayal could destroy everyone aboard. Bonny became legendary because she fought beyond every expectation. Bonny entered history through a mixture of testimony, scandal, and fascination. She came from Ireland, grew up in the colonial Atlantic world, and became linked with the pirate crew of Calico Jack Rackham. What made her famous was not simply that she sailed among pirates. It was that witnesses described her as someone who took part directly in the fighting. In a world that expected women to remain far from the violence of sea raiding, her presence challenged nearly every assumption. Stories say she wore men's clothing during action, handled weapons, and refused to behave as a frightened passenger. Her legend grew especially powerful after Rackham's crew was captured. While many men were accused of hiding below, Bonny and Mary Red were remembered as having resisted. The details have been retold for generations, sometimes with exaggeration. Still, the core remains remarkable. She became a symbol of defiance in a brutal world that tried to deny her agency. The golden age of piracy lasted less than one human lifetime. The era most people imagine when they picture Caribbean pirates was surprisingly short. It stretched across the late 17th and early 18th centuries, with its most famous burst lasting only a few decades. That narrow window produced names that still dominate popular memory. The timing was no accident. European wars had trained thousands of sailors and privateers. When peace came, many found themselves unemployed, underpaid, or abandoned in ports where armed ships and maritime knowledge were already available. At the same time, Atlantic trade was booming, and valuable cargo crossed waters that were difficult to police. Piracy flourished in that gap between opportunity and control. Then governments responded with naval patrols, pardons, trials, and public executions. The sea lanes slowly tightened. What feels like an ancient age of endless adventure was, in historical terms, a brief and violent flash. Its legend became so large partly because the moment itself vanished so quickly. Pirates hunted across oceans, not only through the Caribbean. The Caribbean became the most famous stage, but piracy was never confined to palm-fringed islands and Spanish treasure routes. Sea raiders operated wherever ships carried wealth, and protection was uncertain. In the Atlantic, they threatened merchant traffic moving between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. In the Indian Ocean, pirates targeted rich vessels connected to trade across Asia and the Middle East. The Red Sea and the waters near Madagascar became especially important during certain years, because ships there could carry extraordinary goods and valuable passengers. Mediterranean corsairs followed older patterns of raiding that shaped coastal life for centuries. Chinese and Southeast Asian waters also saw large pirate forces that could rival state navies. This wider geography matters because it changes the story. Piracy was not a single culture or one tropical episode. It was a recurring response to maritime wealth, weak enforcement, and skilled sailors willing to risk everything on the open sea. Some pirate treasure was real, but most legends grew after capture. Pirates did steal wealth, but not always in the glittering form later stories preferred. A captured ship might hold silver, coins, jewels, or gold dust, but it could also carry cloth, spices, sugar, timber, medicine, weapons, tools, or food. These goods were easier to use, trade, or sell through hidden networks. The idea of chests buried on lonely beaches became far more powerful in fiction than it usually was in life. Pirates needed supplies, pleasure, repairs, bribes, and wages. They often spent or divided plunder quickly because keeping it created problems. After capture, however, rumors grew. Trial records, newspapers, frightened witnesses, and hopeful treasure hunters turned scattered facts into irresistible stories. A missing captain became a secret hoard. A hidden payment became a buried fortune. The treasure legend survived because it offered the perfect mystery. Somewhere, just beyond proof, a stolen fortune might still be waiting under sand, stone, or silence. The greatest pirate fleet in history was commanded by Zheng Yi Sao. In the early 19th century, one woman rose to control a maritime force so large that it dwarfed many better-known pirate crews. Zheng Yi Sao began as the wife of a powerful Chinese pirate leader, but after his death, she secured authority over a vast confederation. Her fleets operated along the South China coast and challenged imperial power, merchant shipping, and local authorities. What made her extraordinary was not only scale, it was control. She helped maintain rules over thousands of fighters, hundreds of vessels, and a complex system of plunder, punishment, and command. Her organization was closer to a floating empire than a single outlaw crew. Even more astonishing, she eventually negotiated surrender on favorable terms and lived after piracy rather than ending on a gallows. Many famous pirates burned brightly and died violently. She did something rarer. She built power, held it, negotiated from strength, and walked away with her legend intact. Blackbeard captured dozens of ships during his brief pirate career. His time at the height of piracy lasted only a small part of his life, yet the impact was enormous. He operated during a moment when Atlantic trade was rich, colonial authorities were strained, and fear could travel faster than official news. His crew took merchant vessels, blockaded Charleston, and moved through coastal waters with an audacity that alarmed entire communities. The scale of his captures helped build the impression that he was everywhere at once. In reality, he depended on speed, intelligence, intimidation, and the ability to exploit weak defenses. His name became attached to sudden appearances and humiliating losses for those who thought themselves safe. The brevity of his career makes the legend more striking. He did not need decades to become unforgettable. Within a short span, he created enough terror to enter history as the model of the pirate captain. His shadow became larger than the number of years he ruled the sea. Henry Morgan became a knight after raiding Spanish colonies. Henry Morgan shows how confusing the line between outlaw and national hero could become. To Spain, he was a terrifying raider who attacked valuable settlements in the Caribbean. To England, he could be presented as a useful privateer striking a rival empire. His assaults were bold, destructive, and profitable, especially the famous attack on Panama. Yet instead of being remembered only as a criminal, he moved into colonial politics and gained respectability. After diplomatic tensions shifted, his actions became controversial, but they did not destroy him. He was eventually knighted and served as Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. That transformation is astonishing because it reveals how piracy, privateering, and imperial warfare could overlap. Violence at sea might be condemned or celebrated depending on whose flag benefited. Morgan's life reads almost like a warning about historical labels. The same raid could be called a crime, a victory, or a service to the crown, depending on who told the story. Captain Kidd was hired to hunt pirates before becoming accused himself. William Kidd's story is one of the great reversals in maritime history. He began his famous voyage with official backing, powerful investors, and a commission to attack pirates and enemy vessels. That should have placed him on the lawful side of the struggle. Instead, confusion, bad luck, disputed captures, and political danger pulled him toward disaster. His seizure of the Cadog merchant became the central problem because the ship's status was contested and its value was enormous. Once powerful sponsors needed distance from scandal, Kidd became easier to sacrifice than defend. He insisted he had acted within his commission, but the courts did not save him. His execution helped turn him into a warning and then into a legend. The mystery deepened because he had hidden some valuables before returning to face judgment. A man sent out to suppress piracy became one of the most famous accused pirates in the English-speaking world. Bartholomew Roberts captured more ships than many famous pirates combined. Bartholomew Roberts, often called Blackbeard, was one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age. His career began unwillingly after his ship was taken, but he adapted with astonishing speed. Once chosen as captain, he led crews across the Atlantic with discipline, boldness, and relentless energy. Estimates credit him with taking hundreds of vessels, a number that towers over many better-known names. His success came from range as much as aggression. He operated off the Americas, West Africa, and other busy trade zones, striking where merchant traffic offered opportunity. Unlike the image of the drunken pirate drifting from raid to raid, Roberts was remembered as controlled, demanding, and serious about command. His rules aboard ship were strict. His raids could be swift and efficient. He became a nightmare for merchants because he did not remain in one predictable hunting ground. His legend proves that fame and actual success are not always the same thing. Calico Jack's flag became one of piracy's most recognizable symbols. John Rackham was not the most successful pirate captain, but the design associated with him became one of the most enduring images in pirate culture. The skull above crossed cutlasses is bold, simple, and instantly understandable. It suggests death, violence, and close combat in one sharp picture. That clarity helped it survive in public imagination long after Rackham himself was gone. His nickname came from the bright calico clothing he was said to favor, which gave him a distinctive identity among more fearsome figures. His actual record of plunder was modest compared with major captains, but history does not always remember people in proportion to their achievements. Sometimes one image carries a name farther than a lifetime of victories could. The flag became a shorthand for piracy itself, appearing in books, films, games, and costumes. Rackham's crew was captured quickly, yet the symbol connected to him kept sailing through culture for centuries. Bonny and Mary Read sailed together under Calico Jack. Their shared presence aboard Rackham's vessel made the crew one of the most famous in pirate history. Mary Read had lived through a life already filled with disguise and danger before she entered the pirate record. Bonny brought a reputation for temper, courage, and refusal to accept the limits placed upon her. Together they became a rare documented pair of women accused of active piracy in the Caribbean. Their story survives partly because it shocked the world that recorded it. During the crew's capture, later accounts claimed the two women fought more fiercely than many of the men. After trial, both escaped immediate execution by revealing that they were pregnant. That legal delay made their story even more dramatic, and it helped preserve their names. Much about them is filtered through sensational writing, but their existence was real enough to disturb the expectations of their age. They became unforgettable because they stood where society said they could not. Mary Read spent years disguised as a man before piracy. Her life before the sea raids reads like a chain of reinventions. According to the most famous accounts, she was raised for a time as a boy, then continued using male identity in different settings. This allowed her access to work, movement, and military life that would have been difficult or impossible for a woman in her circumstances. She reportedly served as a soldier and experienced the world of discipline, danger, and masculine disguise long before joining pirates. Whether every episode was told with perfect accuracy is hard to know, because early biographies enjoyed drama. Still, the pattern is powerful. Read's ability to cross social boundaries helped her survive in places where identity could decide a person's fate. By the time she appeared in the pirate record, she was not simply pretending for convenience. She had learned how clothing, confidence, and expectation could open doors. Her legend rests on that dangerous skill of becoming what the world allowed. Grace O'Malley negotiated directly with Queen Elizabeth I. Long before the golden age of Caribbean piracy, Grace O'Malley commanded power along the west coast of Ireland. She was a leader of ships, clans, and coastal influence in a world shaped by Gaelic authority and English expansion. Her most famous moment came when she met Queen Elizabeth I in 1593. The meeting itself feels almost impossible. Two formidable women, both aging rulers in their own worlds, faced one another across language, politics, and power. O'Malley sought the release of family members and protection for her interests. Elizabeth wanted order in Ireland and recognition of her authority. The encounter did not make them equals in rank, but it proved O'Malley could not be dismissed as a local nuisance. She had become important enough to stand before the English crown and bargain. Her story stretches the meaning of pirate legend, because she was not only a raider. She was a maritime ruler defending her world. Qing Shi enforced strict laws across a massive pirate confederation. Power on the South China coast required more than daring raids. It required rules that thousands of people would obey. Qing Shi, also known as Zheng Yi Sao, helped govern a confederation with a code that could be severe and practical. Theft from the common plunder could be punished harshly. Unauthorized violence against captives could bring consequences. Desertion, disobedience, and private dealing threatened the whole system. so discipline became essential. This was not softness. It was control. A huge pirate organization could collapse if crews cheated one another or local communities turned completely against them. Her authority depended on making the Confederation predictable enough to function and frightening enough to survive. That combination made her far more than a dramatic figurehead. She was an administrator of maritime power. The scale of her command challenges the usual picture of pirates as chaotic bands of rogues. Under her influence, piracy became organized, regulated, and dangerously effective. Black Bart Roberts dressed elegantly even during dangerous sea raids. Roberts cultivated an image very different from the ragged pirate stereotype. Accounts describe him wearing fine clothing, rich fabrics, jewelry, and a feathered hat when he appeared in action. This was not merely vanity. Dress could communicate authority, confidence, and command in a world where appearances mattered. A captain who looked fearless under threat could steady his own crew and unsettle his enemies. Roberts also seems to have valued order. His shipboard rules discouraged gambling, controlled drinking, and set expectations for conduct. That discipline contrasts sharply with the common image of pirates as purely reckless. He could be stylish, ruthless, religious in language, and intensely practical. Such contradictions make him fascinating. He understood that command was partly performance, but performance had to be backed by results. When he stood on deck dressed like a gentleman warrior, he was sending a message. He was not a desperate criminal scrambling for loot. He was the master of a floating enterprise. Blackbeard's ship was called Queen Anne's Revenge. Before it carried his name into legend, the vessel had a very different life. It began as a French slave ship called La Concorde, built for the brutal Atlantic trade. When Edward Teach captured it near the island of Martinique, he transformed it into something far more dangerous. He added guns, expanded its fighting power, and made it the center of his short but terrifying career. A ship like this was not just transport. It was a mobile stronghold, a threat, a workplace, and a symbol of command. Its name carried political echoes from the recent War of the Spanish Succession, when Queen Anne had ruled Britain. That made the renamed vessel sound almost like revenge from the age of privateering itself. The ship eventually ran aground near North Carolina, ending its service before its reputation could fade. Centuries later, wreckage linked to it gave historians a rare physical doorway into the world behind the legend. Some pirates flew friendly flags before revealing their true colors. Deception at sea could be as valuable as speed or firepower. A suspicious merchant might flee if it saw a pirate approach openly, so raiders often hid their identity until the final stretch of a chase. They could show the flag of a harmless nation, a known trading partner, or even the same country as their target. This trick bought them time. A ship that looked safe could move closer before anyone prepared the guns or changed course. Then, when escape became difficult, the disguise ended. The sudden change was designed to shock the other crew into surrender. Maritime warfare had long included false colors, but pirates used the tactic with ruthless practicality. In an age without radio warnings or instant verification, a flag was a fragile promise. Sailors had to make life-changing decisions based on cloth seen through distance and weather. For pirates, that uncertainty was a door, and they knew how to open it. Pirate flags were often black, red, or frighteningly symbolic. The colors and images chosen by sea raiders were meant to work quickly on frightened minds. Black often suggested death, finality, and outlaw identity. Red could imply that violence would follow if resistance continued. The pictures were usually stark because a complicated design would be useless through wind, spray, and distance. Bones, blades, skeletons, hourglasses, and bleeding hearts all carried messages that sailors could understand without a written word. These were not random decorations. They were visual threats built for a world where literacy varied and reaction time mattered. A merchant crew might have only minutes to decide whether to fight, run, or submit. Symbols gave the attackers a way to compress reputation into one terrifying signal. They also helped different pirate captains create distinct identities. A flag could become a signature, almost like a name written across the sea. Long before modern logos, pirates understood the power of an image that could make people act. A red pirate flag warned that mercy might not come. In some accounts, red colors at sea carried a harsher message than black. They suggested that the moment for negotiation had passed, or that no quarter would be given if the target resisted. Whether every sailor interpreted the signal in exactly the same way is uncertain, because traditions varied across time and region. Still, the idea itself was powerful. It turned cloth into a threat of consequence. To a merchant crew, the sight could force a terrible calculation. If they surrendered, they might lose cargo, but keep their lives. If they fought and failed, the punishment might be far worse. Pirates benefited from that fear because damaged ships and dead sailors were not always useful. A swift surrender protected the prize. The red flag's real strength lay in the imagination of those who saw it. It made the next few minutes feel decisive. It asked each person aboard a target ship how much courage was worth. Treasure maps were mostly created by novels, not real pirates. The famous map with a mark at the hidden spot belongs more to storytelling than to ordinary pirate practice. Real pirates had little reason to draw clear directions to stolen wealth and risk that paper falling into someone else's hands. Plunder was usually divided, traded, spent, hidden briefly, or converted into useful goods. The enduring map legend owes much to adventure fiction, especially stories that turned piracy into a puzzle of clues, islands, and secret hoards. That fictional device was irresistible because it let readers become hunters. It transformed crime into mystery and stolen wealth into a game waiting to be solved. In real life, secrecy was messy and practical. A pirate might conceal valuables temporarily, but a neat diagram with a dramatic sign would be foolish. Still, the image became stronger than the facts. A simple scrap of paper could make anyone imagine that the past had left a trail, and that one clever person might still follow it. Buried treasure was far rarer than stories suggest. The idea of pirates hiding chests under sand is one of the most durable myths in popular history. It survives because it feels perfect. A remote shore, a secret place, and a fortune waiting beneath the surface. Real piracy was usually less romantic. Crews wanted rewards they could use soon because their lives were unstable and dangerous. Coins could be divided. Goods could be sold. Supplies could keep a vessel moving. Hiding wealth for years required trust, planning, and confidence that someone would survive long enough to return. Those were not safe assumptions in the pirate world. There were exceptions, and a few cases of concealed valuables helped keep the dream alive. Yet the great age of buried pirate hoards mostly grew in imagination after the fact. The myth speaks to a human desire as much as to maritime history. It suggests that somewhere beneath ordinary ground, the past may still be holding its breath. Pirates usually spent stolen riches quickly in port towns. When a crew reached a friendly or careless harbor, plunder could vanish with startling speed. Sailors who had endured hunger, danger, storms, injury, and fear often wanted immediate reward. Money went into drink, gambling, clothing, weapons, food, repairs, lodging, and companionship. Some bought status for a few bright days, walking through port like men who had beaten the world. Others paid debts, bribed officials, or purchased supplies for the next voyage. This quick spending helped pirate economies thrive in certain towns. Tavern keepers, merchants, smugglers, and corrupt intermediaries all benefited from stolen goods turning into local profit. It also explains why many pirates did not become lasting rich men. Their wealth was unstable because their lives were unstable. A fortune could be won in one attack and gone before the next sail was raised. The cycle was reckless, but it was understandable. For people who might die at sea next month, tomorrow often mattered more than saving. Stolen cargo was often more valuable than gold or jewels. A pirate prize was not always a glittering chest. Very often, the most useful wealth came packed in barrels, bales, crates, and sacks. Merchant ships carried the working riches of the Atlantic world. Sugar, tobacco, cocoa, indigo, textiles, tools, spices, rope, sails, and provisions could be worth a great deal when sold through the right contacts. Some goods were easier to divide than others. Some were easier to hide. Some were valuable because pirates needed them personally, especially food, water, medicine, ammunition, and replacement gear. Gold makes a better legend, but cargo kept a pirate voyage alive. It also tied piracy directly to global trade. Raiders followed routes not because treasure was always shining in the hold, but because commerce itself was valuable. A ship full of ordinary goods could represent months of wages and survival. The real pirate economy was practical, opportunistic, and deeply connected to the everyday materials that kept empires moving. Pirates prized medicine, cloth, tools, sugar, and navigational instruments. The most precious items aboard a captured vessel were often the ones that solved immediate problems. Medicine could mean survival after fever, infection, or injury. Cloth could become clothing, trade goods, bandages, or sail repair. Tools allowed carpenters and sailors to keep a damaged ship alive after rough weather or battle. Sugar was profitable, portable, and central to Atlantic commerce. Navigational instruments were especially important because skill alone was not enough on long voyages. A compass, chart, quadrant, or similar tool could help a crew find coasts, avoid reefs, and reach hunting grounds. These objects remind us that piracy was not only dramatic violence, it was logistics under pressure. A crew that could not heal, repair, steer, or feed itself would not remain dangerous for long. The search for useful goods shaped decisions after a capture. Sometimes the most valuable prize was not what looked splendid. It was what kept the next day possible. Some pirate ships carried musicians to keep crews working together. Music at sea had a practical purpose beyond entertainment. Work aboard a sailing vessel depended on timing. Hauling ropes, raising anchors, adjusting sails, and moving heavy equipment required bodies to act together. A steady rhythm could help exhausted men pull as one. Songs also gave structure to long labor, making repetitive tasks easier to endure. On a pirate ship, where discipline could not rely on naval hierarchy alone, shared sound helped create unity. Musicians might play during moments of rest, celebration, or intimidation. Their presence reminds us that ships were social worlds as well as fighting machines. A vessel could be crowded, damp, tense, and dangerous, yet still filled at times with fiddle tunes, rough singing, and stamping feet. That contrast is striking. The same deck that prepared for violence might later become a place of rhythm and release. Music helped sailors remember that they were not only surviving the sea, they were living through it together. Pirate articles could punish theft, gambling, and fighting aboard ship. Many crews used agreed rules because disorder at sea could become deadly. A wooden vessel far from authority had to manage conflict before it tore the crew apart. Rules might forbid stealing from shipmates because trust over shared plunder was essential. Gambling could be restricted because debt and resentment could turn dangerous in cramped quarters. Fighting aboard might be banned or pushed onto shore where quarrels could be settled without damaging the vessel or endangering everyone. These agreements could also regulate lights, weapons, shares, and duties. They were not signs of kindness. They were survival tools. Pirates lived outside the law, but that did not mean they lived without law. Their rules existed because a crew of armed men needed boundaries to function. The ship itself demanded cooperation. If anger, greed, or carelessness took over, the ocean would punish everyone. Pirate articles turned a violent enterprise into something organized enough to keep moving. Injured pirates sometimes received compensation from the shared treasure. Some crews promised payments for wounds suffered during action. The amount could depend on the injury, with different compensation for the loss of a hand, arm, leg, eye, or finger. It was a brutal kind of insurance, but it made sense in a profession where injury could end a sailor's ability to work. Ordinary maritime life offered little security to disabled men. A pirate agreement could at least acknowledge the cost of fighting for the group. This system also encouraged courage during attacks. A crew member knew that if he was badly hurt while helping capture a prize, he might not be abandoned entirely. The payments came from common plunder, which made the risk collective. That detail is fascinating because it reveals a practical awareness beneath the violence. Pirates could be ruthless toward outsiders while making arrangements to protect their own usefulness and loyalty. Their world was harsh, but it recognized that bodies broken in battle had a price. Pirate captains could be removed if crews lost confidence. Command aboard a pirate ship was often conditional. A captain had authority because the crew accepted it, and that acceptance could change. If he became cowardly, reckless, unfair, unlucky, or too controlling, the men could choose someone else. This was very different from naval service, where rank came from the state, and discipline could be enforced with severe punishment. Pirate command depended on results. A captain had to find prizes, judge risks, manage pursuit, and show courage when danger arrived. He also had to respect the crew's expectations about plunder and conduct. Too much softness could invite contempt. Too much tyranny could provoke removal. This made leadership tense and performative. A pirate captain stood at the front in battle, but he also stood under constant judgment. His power was real, yet fragile. Every failed chase, bad decision, or unfair division could weaken him. The crew's loyalty was not automatic. It had to be earned again and again. Quartermasters often held more daily power than pirate captains. On many pirate ships, the quartermaster was not a minor assistant. He could act as the crew's representative, guardian of shares, keeper of discipline, and counterweight to the captain. While the captain might dominate during battle or pursuit, the quartermaster often handled the daily mechanics of fairness. He helped divide plunder, settle disputes, oversee punishment, and speak for ordinary crew members. This role mattered because pirates distrusted unchecked command. Many had suffered under naval or merchant officers who abused power, withheld wages, or used violence casually. A strong quartermaster helped prevent a pirate captain from becoming the kind of tyrant many sailors had fled. In practice, this created a rough balance aboard ship. It was not democracy in the modern sense, and it certainly was not peaceful. Yet it gave the crew a way to protect its interests. The arrangement shows that pirate society was more politically complex than the usual image of chaos allows. Pirates depended on hidden coves, friendly ports, and corrupt officials. No pirate crew could survive by raiding alone. Ships needed water, food, repairs, information, ammunition, and places to sell stolen goods. That meant piracy depended on shore networks. A secluded inlet might hide a vessel long enough for repairs. A sympathetic harbour might provide drink, supplies, and buyers. A corrupt official might look away in exchange for profit. Local merchants could gain from cheap cargo, even when everyone knew where it came from. This relationship made piracy hard to eliminate. It was not only a problem of ships at sea. It was also a problem of communities that found outlaw trade useful. Some ports benefited from pirate spending, while others feared the diplomatic consequences. The coastline became part of the pirate system. Coves, warehouses, taverns, and backroom deals mattered almost as much as cannons. Behind many famous raids stood a quieter world of bargaining, concealment, and people on land who preferred profit over questions. Nassau became a famous pirate refuge in the Bahamas. In the early 18th century, Nassau offered almost everything pirates needed. Its harbour was useful, its location was close to busy shipping routes, and imperial control was weak enough to create space for outlaw power. The Bahamas were full of shallow waters and islands that larger naval vessels found difficult to manage. Pirates could slip through channels, watch passing traffic, and retreat when danger approached. For a time, Nassau became associated with a loose pirate community where crews gathered, traded, repaired, recruited, and celebrated. It was not a romantic paradise. It was unstable, rough, and politically alarming. Authorities eventually recognized that leaving it alone allowed piracy to grow stronger. The arrival of royal authority and the offer of pardons changed its future. Some pirates accepted a path back into legal life, while others resisted and were hunted. Nassau's legend comes from that brief moment when an imperial outpost seemed to become a pirate capital. Port Royal was once called the wickedest city on earth. In 17th century Jamaica, Port Royal became famous for wealth, vice, and maritime ambition. Its deep harbour made it one of the most important English bases in the Caribbean. Privateers and raiders brought in prizes, and the town grew rich from goods captured from Spanish targets. Taverns, merchants, brothels, sailors, soldiers, and speculators crowded into a place where money could move quickly. Its reputation for sin became almost as famous as its strategic value. Then, in 1692, disaster struck. A powerful earthquake shattered the town, and parts of it sank into the harbour. To many observers, the destruction seemed like divine judgment on a place already notorious for excess. That interpretation helped the legend endure. Archaeologists later found preserved remains beneath the water, turning catastrophe into a rare historical record. Port Royal's story feels dramatic because it combines empire, greed, disaster, and memory. A city built on raiding became a warning beneath the waves. Madagascar became a distant meeting place for Indian Ocean pirates. Far from the Caribbean, Madagascar offered pirates a base near some of the richest sea routes in the world. Ships crossing the Indian Ocean could carry goods from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. A raider positioned near those routes had the chance to strike valuable targets. Madagascar's harbours and offshore islands also gave crews places to rest, repair, trade, and form alliances. Some pirates married locally, built settlements, or became part of regional exchange networks. The island's distance from European centres of power made it especially attractive. Authorities could not easily project force across such a vast space. This created a frontier where outlaw sailors could linger longer than they might in tightly watched waters. The Madagascar story widens the imagination of piracy. It shows that the pirate world was not limited to Spanish galleons and Caribbean coves. It stretched into a larger oceanic network where distance itself became a form of protection. Libertalia was a legendary pirate republic that may never have existed. Among the most fascinating pirate stories is the tale of a free settlement, supposedly founded by outlaws in Madagascar. It was described as a place where pirates rejected kings, shared property, and built a society beyond ordinary empire. The idea is thrilling because it turns piracy into political rebellion rather than mere theft. Yet historians have long doubted whether this republic existed as described. It may have been invented or heavily embellished by writers who wanted piracy to carry a philosophical message. That uncertainty is exactly what keeps the story alive. Libertalia sits between history and wish, between evidence and imagination. Even if it was fiction, it reveals something important about how people wanted to think about pirates. They could be monsters, criminals, or adventurers, but they could also become symbols of escape from oppressive systems. The legend asks a tempting question. What if the pirate dream was not only treasure, but a different way to live? Some pirates claimed they were fighting against unfair empires. Not every pirate saw himself as a common thief, at least not in the stories pirates told about themselves. Some claimed they were resisting corrupt merchants, cruel captains, or powerful states that exploited ordinary sailors. These claims could be self-serving, but they were not meaningless. Life at sea was often harsh. Wages could be poor, discipline violent, and legal protection limited. A pirate crew might present itself as a brotherhood of wronged men taking back what the powerful had hoarded. That language helped justify raids and attract recruits. It also made piracy sound like rebellion rather than crime. The truth was complicated. Pirates attacked innocent crews, stole livelihoods, and could be brutal. Yet their complaints emerged from real inequalities in maritime life. This tension makes them historically compelling. They were both predators and products of the world that condemned them. Their excuses reveal the anger beneath the age of empire, even when their actions caused new suffering. Privateers were legal pirates when governments approved their attacks. A privateer carried official permission to attack enemy shipping during wartime. That document, often called a letter of marque, turned sea raiding into a recognized tool of state conflict. The privateer financed risk privately, captured prizes, and shared profits through legal channels. To the enemy, the experience might feel no different from piracy. A ship was chased, boarded, and stripped of value. The difference lay in paperwork, politics, and courts. If the capture was approved, the raider could become wealthy and respectable. If the same act happened without authorization, it could lead to the gallows. This created a dangerous gray zone. Wars ended, commissions expired, and ambitious sailors sometimes continued raiding after legality vanished. Many pirates had privateering experience, which gave them the skills and confidence to attack ships. Privateering shows how states outsourced violence at sea. It also reveals a startling truth. Under the right flag, behavior condemned as piracy could become patriotic service. The line between pirate and hero often depended on politics. History does not judge sea raiders evenly. A captain who attacked the wrong empire might be celebrated at home and cursed abroad. The label attached to him depended on treaties, national interest, religion, propaganda, and who controlled the court records. In one port, he might be toasted as a defender of trade. In another, he might be remembered as a murderer. This shifting judgment helped create legends that still feel unstable. Maritime violence was often wrapped in patriotism when it benefited a crown or colony. When it embarrassed officials or threatened peace, the same habits could become criminal. Sailors understood this instability. They might begin as privateers, drift into illegal plunder, then try to return to respectability when conditions changed. The sea gave them room to blur categories, while governments tried to redraw them. That is why pirate history is so rich in contradiction. Heroism and villainy were not fixed labels. They were often matters of perspective. Sir Francis Drake was a pirate to Spain and a hero to England. Francis Drake's career shows how empire could turn the same man into two different legends. To English supporters, he was a daring sailor who circumnavigated the globe, challenged Spanish power, and brought wealth back to his queen. To Spanish authorities, he was a violent raider who attacked ships, ports, and settlements under the cover of English ambition. His famous voyage around the world was also a campaign of plunder against Spain's Pacific possessions. When he returned, Queen Elizabeth I knighted him aboard his ship. That public honor made his actions part of England's national story. Spain saw something else entirely. Drake exposed the vulnerability of a vast empire and humiliated its officials across oceans they had considered secure. His reputation depended almost entirely on which side of the conflict one stood. He became a hero because England needed heroes, and a pirate because Spain knew the cost of his success. Buccaneers first became famous as hunters before turning to raiding. The word buccaneer did not begin with grand sea battles. It grew from men who lived around the Caribbean and hunted wild cattle and pigs. They preserved meat by smoking it on wooden frames, then sold it to passing ships and settlements. These hunters occupied a rough frontier world shaped by colonial rivalry, survival, and opportunity. Over time, pressure from Spanish authorities and the lure of profit pushed some of them toward raiding. Their knowledge of coasts, islands, food supply, and local conditions made them useful fighters. What began as a way to live off the land became connected to attacks on Spanish shipping and settlements. This origin gives the buccaneer story a surprising texture. They were not born as polished sea rovers. They emerged from smoke, salt meat, border conflict, and the violent economy of the Caribbean. Their transformation shows how piracy could grow out of local survival before becoming part of imperial warfare. The word buccaneer began with smoked meat in the Caribbean. Language can carry a whole history inside it. The term comes from a method of preserving meat on a wooden frame called a buco. Hunters used this technique to smoke cups of wild cattle and pigs in the Caribbean. The people associated with that work became known by a name connected to the process. Over time, as some of these hunters turned toward raiding and privateering, the word changed meaning. It moved from food preparation to maritime violence. That shift is fascinating because it shows how piracy was rooted in everyday material life. Before the romantic image of cutlasses and sea chases, there were fires, hunting grounds, salted provisions, and trade with sailors who needed food. The smoked meat itself helped sustain ships in a harsh climate. A word that now suggests daring raids once belonged to the smell of cooking and preservation. Buccaneer history begins not with treasure, but with survival. Pirates used small, fast vessels to chase larger merchant ships. Speed could matter more than size. A heavily loaded merchant vessel might carry valuable goods, but it was not always built for quick escape. Smaller pirate craft could close distance, maneuver sharply, and operate in waters where deeper ships struggled. A fast vessel allowed pirates to choose the moment of attack. It could dart from behind islands, chase a target with favorable wind, or flee when a naval ship appeared. This flexibility was crucial because pirates lived by opportunity. They did not need to defeat every ship. They needed to catch the vulnerable ones and avoid the dangerous ones. Smaller craft could also require fewer crew members and less maintenance, which made them practical for raiders with limited resources. The image of a giant pirate warship is dramatic, but many successful attacks depended on leaner vessels that moved like predators. On the sea, power was not only measured in cannons, it was measured in reach, timing, and escape. Sloops were prized because they could slip through shallow waters. A sloop could be a pirate's perfect hunting craft. It was usually smaller than major merchantmen, but that was part of its strength. Its shallow draft let it move through coastal channels, reefs, island passages, and hidden anchorages that larger ships might not dare enter. In the Caribbean and the Bahamas, this mattered enormously. The geography favored vessels that could vanish into narrow waters and reappear where least expected. A sloop could also be quick under sail, especially with a crew large enough to handle it aggressively. Pirates could pack many armed men aboard, making boarding attacks more dangerous for a target. Naval commanders found such vessels frustrating because pursuit was difficult in broken island waters. A sloop could turn the landscape into protection. It made the sea feel full of secret doors. For pirates who depended on surprise and retreat, that ability was priceless. The vessel was not grand, but it was perfectly suited to the work. Bigger pirate ships carried more cannons, but moved less easily. A large, captured vessel offered obvious advantages. More deck space meant more fighters, more stores, and more guns. A powerful broadside could intimidate targets and challenge better defended ships. Yet size came with problems. A deep hull could not enter shallow refuges. A bigger ship needed more supplies, more maintenance, and more coordination. It might be harder to hide and slower to turn. In pirate hands, every advantage had to be weighed against escape. A vessel that could win a fight but failed to outrun a Navy patrol might become a trap. Some captains preferred strength because it allowed them to attack richer prizes. Others relied on speed and flexibility. This constant trade-off shaped pirate strategy. They were not simply collecting the largest ships they could find. They were choosing tools for particular waters and targets. A pirate ship was a weapon, but it was also a risk. Too much power could become too much weight. Pirates sometimes modified captured ships for speed and intimidation. When pirates took a vessel they liked, they did not always use it as they found it. They might remove bulk, adjust rigging, add guns, alter deck space, or refit areas to hold more fighters. A merchant ship was designed to carry cargo profitably. A pirate ship needed to chase, threaten, board, escape, and survive rough handling. That meant reshaping the prize into a predator. Extra gun ports could increase menace. Cleared decks could make boarding parties move faster. Changes to sails and rigging could improve pursuit. Even the appearance of a vessel could matter if it made targets lose heart before the fight. Refitting required carpenters, sailmakers, tools, and safe places to work. It also showed planning beyond the raid itself. Pirates were not only stealing ships, they were adapting technology to their dangerous business. Every altered plank and repositioned cannon turned someone else's merchant investment into an instrument of fear. Ship surgeons were valuable enough to be forced into pirate crews. Medical skill was rare at sea, and pirates knew its worth. A voyage could be ruined by infection, fever, wounds, broken bones, burns, or disease spreading through cramped quarters. A person who could amputate a limb, dress a wound, treat sickness, or manage pain might save lives that the crew could not afford to lose. Because trained surgeons were so valuable, pirates sometimes compelled them to stay after capturing a ship. This was a grim form of recruitment, but it reveals the hard practical needs behind pirate life. Battles created injuries, and long voyages made every untreated illness more dangerous. A surgeon aboard did not make conditions safe. He often worked with limited supplies, rough tools, and little comfort for the patient. Still, his presence could be the difference between survival and death. In a world where a small cut might become fatal, medical knowledge was treasure of another kind. Navigators could decide whether a pirate voyage succeeded or failed. A captain might command the attack, but a skilled navigator could determine whether there was any prize to attack at all. The ocean was not an empty road. It was a shifting world of reefs, shoals, currents, storms, fog, coastlines, and dangerous shallows. A small error could wreck a vessel before an enemy ever appeared. Good navigators understood where merchant ships were likely to pass, when seasonal winds would help or hinder pursuit, and how far a crew could travel before water and food became urgent. Their knowledge turned scattered information into a route. They could help a crew find a remote anchorage after a raid, avoid known patrols, or approach a harbor without striking hidden rocks. This made them valuable far beyond ordinary rank. A pirate ship without navigation was only a weapon drifting toward ruin. With the right mind guiding it, the same ship became a moving trap on the world's trade routes. Pirates used stars, coastlines, currents, and experience to navigate. Long before electronic instruments, sailors read the world with patience and memory. At night, stars helped reveal direction and latitude. By day, the shape of a coastline could confirm position if the crew knew what to look for. Currents could push a vessel faster than expected or drag it away from safety. Birds, cloud banks, watercolor, and floating vegetation could hint that land was near. Charts existed, but they were not always accurate, complete, or available to outlaws. Much depended on experience built over years of dangerous voyages. A seasoned sailor might recognize the smell of land after weeks at sea, or sense that a current was carrying the ship toward trouble. This kind of knowledge was practical, physical, and deeply earned. It made the ocean legible. Pirates survived by using the same navigational wisdom as merchants and navies, then turning it toward ambush, escape, and pursuit. Life aboard pirate ships was dangerous, crowded, and deeply uncertain. The romance of piracy often disappears when you imagine the actual deck beneath your feet. A ship could be hot, cramped, damp, noisy, and foul-smelling. Hammocks swung close together. Privacy was almost non-existent. Men lived with wet clothing, hard labor, poor sleep, and the constant risk of injury. A sudden squall could send spars crashing down. A loose rope could break bones. A minor wound could become deadly. Even success brought tension, because stolen goods had to be guarded, divided, hidden, or sold. Nobody aboard knew when a naval patrol might appear over the horizon. The crew might be celebrating one morning and fighting for survival by nightfall. This uncertainty shaped every decision. Pirate life promised a share of plunder and a measure of freedom, but it also demanded acceptance of danger as a daily companion. The sea did not care whether a man was bold, desperate, or afraid. Disease killed more sailors than sea battles ever did. For all the drama of cannon fire, sickness was the more persistent enemy. Crowded ships created ideal conditions for infection to spread. Fresh food was limited. Water could sour, and sanitation was poor. Fevers, dysentery, malaria, smallpox, scurvy, and infected wounds could weaken a crew long before battle began. A voyage through tropical waters added new threats, especially when sailors went ashore in unhealthy ports or mosquito-filled anchorages. Medical knowledge was limited, and treatment could be painful, ineffective, or based on wrong assumptions. A strong crew might become helpless if illness moved through the ship. This mattered to pirates because every able body was useful. They needed men to haul lines, steer, fight, pump water, and keep watch. Disease could reduce a feared crew to exhausted survivors. In that sense, the most dangerous force aboard was sometimes invisible. It did not roar like a gun. It spread quietly, one fevered body at a time. Fresh water was often more precious than stolen silver. A ship could carry coins and still be doomed if the water ran low. Every crew needed drinking water, cooking water, and enough liquid to survive punishing heat. Barrels could leak, become contaminated, or grow foul during long voyages. Rain might save a crew, but no sailor could depend on it arriving at the right moment. Islands and coastal springs became vital because they offered the chance to refill casks before the next crossing. Water shaped routes, schedules, and risk. A pirate captain might choose a less profitable course if it kept the crew alive. Thirst could turn discipline into desperation. Men weakened by dehydration could not fight, repair rigging, or keep watch. This simple need cut through every legend of treasure. Silver could buy pleasure in port, but water bought another day at sea. In a world of stolen cargo and dangerous ambition, survival still depended on the most ordinary substance on Earth. Food at sea could spoil before a voyage was finished. A ship's stores were always fighting time. Meat could rot, biscuits could fill with insects, and dampness could ruin precious supplies. Salted provisions helped, but they were not pleasant, and they did not last forever under harsh conditions. Fresh fruit and vegetables were rare once a voyage stretched on, which left crews vulnerable to weakness and disease. Fishing helped when luck allowed, yet no crew could rely on the sea to feed everyone. Captured ships became valuable not only for cargo, but for whatever edible stores they carried. A barrel of flour, a sack of peas, or a live animal could feel like a blessing after weeks of hard rationing. Hunger made crews irritable and dangerous. It also limited how long pirates could remain at sea before seeking land. Behind every daring raid was the plain arithmetic of mouths and meals. Even the boldest plan could collapse when the galley had nothing left to serve. Rats, insects, and rot were ordinary problems aboard wooden ships. A sailing vessel was never completely under human control. It carried unwanted life in its timbers, stores, ropes, bedding, and holds. Rats gnawed food, damaged gear, and spread filth. Weevils appeared in biscuits. Cockroaches and lice thrived in cramped spaces. Wood itself could decay if dampness settled in the wrong places. Bilge water gathered foul smells below deck, while salt, sun, and strain wore down everything exposed above. Sailors lived inside a machine made from organic material, and that machine was constantly being eaten, soaked, strained, and repaired. Pirates had to manage these problems while staying ready to fight or flee. Cleaning, pumping, patching, scraping, and mending were not glamorous, but they kept the ship alive. This gives pirate history a rough physical reality. The same vessel that looked fearsome from a distance might contain spoiled food, crawling pests, and men working every day to stop the ocean from taking it apart. Pirates feared storms as much as any navy patrol. A warship could be outwitted, outrun, or avoided. A storm could not be negotiated with. Heavy weather turned the sea into a force that ignored courage and reputation. Winds could tear sails apart. Waves could smash boats, flood decks, and drive a vessel onto reefs. Lightning, darkness, and rain made every command harder to hear, and every task more dangerous. A crew might cut away rigging just to keep the ship from capsizing. Cargo could shift below and change the balance of the hull. Men could be swept overboard in seconds. For pirates, storms were especially threatening because they often operated far from secure support. A damaged ship might not find a friendly harbor in time. Even a successful voyage could be ruined before the plunder was sold. Stories of piracy focus on human enemies, but sailors knew the deeper truth. The sea itself was the greater power, and every voyage depended on its permission. Hurricanes could scatter fleets and erase pirate plans overnight. In tropical waters, a single storm system could overturn months of preparation. Hurricanes arrived with destructive winds, rising seas, and chaotic rain that could reduce visibility to almost nothing. Ships at anchor might drag loose and collide. Vessels at sea could be separated from companions and flown far from intended routes. A pirate crew waiting near a trade lane might lose its target, its supplies, or its mast before the hunt even began. Hurricanes also changed coastlines and harbours, leaving wreckage, drowned settlements, and altered channels behind. Their timing could decide history in ways no captain planned. A fleet gathered for raiding could become scattered survivors. A naval pursuit could fail because both hunter and hunted were forced to run for shelter. This made weather part of strategy, but never fully controllable. Pirates watched the sky with practical dread. In a world built on risk, hurricanes were reminders that the greatest ambush might come from the atmosphere itself. Cannon fire was terrifying, but boarding decided many pirate attacks. Cannons could break masts, smash rails, and send splinters flying through a deck like knives. Their sound alone could shake the nerve of a crew. Yet pirates often wanted the target ship intact because the vessel and cargo were the prize. That made boarding crucial. Once ships came close, the fight became personal and chaotic. Attackers hurled grappling hooks, pulled hulls together, and rushed across with pistols, axes, cutlasses, and sheer numbers. The goal was to overwhelm defenders before they could organize. Smoke, shouting, blood, and crashing wood filled the moment. A merchant crew might surrender once pirates reached the deck because close combat left little room for hope. Boarding also allowed raiders to seize documents, valuables, supplies, and prisoners before anything was destroyed. It was dangerous, but it matched the pirate business model. They needed control more than wreckage. Cannons opened the door, but men crossing the gap often decided who owned the ship. Pirates often wanted cargo without destroying the ship. A captured vessel was valuable only if it remained useful. Cannons could frighten a target, but too much damage could sink profit along with the hull. Pirates had practical reasons to avoid unnecessary destruction. A ship might be kept, stripped, traded, ransomed, or released after its goods were taken. Even sails, rigging, anchors, ropes, and spare timber could be worth keeping. A shattered prize meant lost cargo, lost tools, lost time, and possible exposure to naval pursuit. This is why intimidation mattered so much. If a merchant crew surrendered quickly, pirates could take what they wanted with less risk to everyone involved. They could search the hold, question the captain, gather supplies, and decide the ship's fate. Violence always remained close, but profit encouraged restraint when possible. Pirate attacks were not mindless explosions of destruction. They were theft under pressure, and a skilled crew understood that a floating ship could be more useful than a wreck. A terrifying reputation could save pirates from bloody combat. The most effective pirates did not need to fight every time. If their name carried enough dread, a target crew might surrender at the first clear sign of danger. This spared the pirates injuries, preserved ammunition, and kept the prize in better condition. Reputation was built through earlier raids, survivor accounts, port gossip, printed reports, and deliberate acts of display. A captain known for punishing resistance could become more dangerous in imagination than in the moment itself. That fear created a strange economy. The more frightening the pirate seemed, the less often he might need to prove it. This did not make him harmless. It meant his past violence continued working for him. Merchant sailors lived in a world where rumor could be a survival guide. If they believed resistance would bring disaster, surrender became rational. For pirates, that was victory before battle. A legend could cross the water faster than a ship and soften a target before any weapon was raised. Some captives joined pirate crews rather than return to hardship. Not everyone taken by pirates wanted to be rescued. Some captured sailors faced brutal discipline, low wages, debt, or dangerous work aboard merchant and naval vessels. When a pirate crew offered a share of plunder and a voice in shipboard affairs, the choice could become complicated. A man might claim he was forced, especially if later captured by authorities, but some joined willingly. Others may have accepted under pressure, caught between fear of pirates and misery in legal service. This uncertainty appears often in court records, where accused sailors insisted they had acted against their will. The truth could be difficult to untangle. Piracy offered risk, but ordinary maritime life was already risky. For a poor sailor with little to lose, outlaw life might seem like a brutal chance at improvement. This does not romanticize the decision. It reveals how harsh the legal world could be when an illegal one looked, for a moment, like freedom. Pirate crews brought together sailors from many nations and backgrounds. A pirate ship could become a floating mixture of languages, skills, and life stories. Crews might include English, Irish, French, Dutch, African, Spanish, Portuguese, indigenous, and mixed heritage sailors, depending on region and circumstance. Some were former merchant seamen. Some had served in navies. Some were captured specialists. Others were fugitives, runaways, or men displaced by war and trade. The sea created contact between people who might never have met on land. Pirate crews used that diversity because survival mattered more than tidy categories. A person who could steer, cook, repair, fight, translate, or navigate had value. This mixture could create tension, but it also made pirate crews adaptable. They gathered knowledge from different coasts and routes. They knew ports, languages, customs, and weaknesses across wide stretches of ocean. The result was not a utopia. It was a dangerous community formed by opportunity. Still, its diversity helps explain how pirates could move through such a connected world. Enslaved people sometimes escaped into pirate crews seeking freedom. For some people trapped in the Atlantic slave system, a pirate vessel could appear as a desperate opening. Enslaved men captured at sea or living near ports sometimes joined pirate crews, whether by choice, coercion, or complicated circumstances between the two. For those seeking escape, piracy might offer movement, weapons, pay, and a chance to live outside the plantation world. Some black sailors became important members of pirate crews, bringing maritime experience and courage shaped by unimaginable pressure. Yet the reality was deeply uneven. Pirates also operated within the same violent Atlantic economy that profited from human bondage. Some sold captives or treated people brutally. Others accepted formerly enslaved sailors into their ranks. This contradiction is essential. Pirate ships could offer moments of freedom to some, while still participating in a world built on exploitation. The story is powerful because it is not simple. It shows how people in desperate conditions searched for any crack in a cruel system. Some pirate ships offered more equality than merchant vessels. Compared with many legal ships, pirate crews could provide ordinary sailors with a stronger voice and a clearer share of reward. Merchant sailors often endured strict hierarchy, delayed pay, bad food, and harsh punishment from officers. Naval service could be even more severe. especially for men forced aboard through impressment. Pirate crews, by contrast, sometimes voted on major decisions, divided plunder by agreed shares, and limited the captain's power outside combat. This did not make pirate life fair by modern standards. It was still violent, dangerous, and criminal. Yet for many sailors of the time, it may have felt less oppressive than lawful employment. The comparison helps explain why piracy could attract recruits despite the risk of execution. People do not always choose danger because they misunderstand it. Sometimes they choose danger because the alternative already feels intolerable. Pirate equality was rough, limited, and often temporary, but in its own age, it could be startlingly real. Pirates still lived within a violent and exploitative world. It is tempting to turn pirates into rebels who simply escaped unjust systems. The truth is darker. They were shaped by empire, war, trade, and poverty, but they also harmed other people. Their raids could terrify ordinary sailors who had little power of their own. They stole cargo that represented livelihoods, disrupted coastal communities, and sometimes treated prisoners with cruelty. Even when they created fairer rules for themselves, that fairness rarely extended to everyone they encountered. Many pirate crews benefited from the same global commerce they attacked. Some took advantage of enslaved labor, corrupt markets, and imperial rivalries. This makes them fascinating, but it should also keep the story honest. Pirates were not outside history. They were inside its violence, using the tools and opportunities their world provided. Their legends endure because they seem free, but their freedom often depended on the suffering of others. That tension is what makes real pirate history more compelling than the costume version. Their legends often hide the suffering caused by raids. A pirate attack was not an adventure for the people on the receiving end. It could mean fear, injury, loss of wages, imprisonment, abandonment, or death. Merchant sailors were often working men with little control over the cargo they carried. Passengers might be caught in danger they never chose. Coastal families could suffer when raids destroyed property or interrupted trade. A ship's owner might recover through insurance or political influence, but ordinary crew members could be left with trauma and poverty. Later stories often soften this reality because treasure hunts and daring captains are easier to enjoy. Entertainment tends to focus on rebellion, freedom, and mystery, rather than the human cost. Yet the suffering is part of the truth. Without it, piracy becomes a fantasy detached from history. The real story is more powerful because it holds both sides at once. Pirates could be bold and charismatic, while their actions still left frightened people in their wake. Piracy grew wherever trade routes became rich and poorly defended. Sea raiding followed opportunity. When valuable cargo moved along predictable routes and protection was weak, piracy became more likely. This pattern appeared in many parts of the world because maritime trade always created temptation. Ships carried wealth across enormous distances, often beyond the immediate reach of armies or courts. A successful raid could reward a crew more quickly than years of legal labor. Geography also mattered. Narrow passages, island chains, river mouths, and coastal hiding places gave attackers chances to wait, strike, and disappear. Political instability made the problem worse. Wars produced trained sailors and armed vessels. Then peace sometimes left those men without work. Corruption on shore helped stolen goods enter markets. Piracy was not random. It grew from the structure of commerce itself. The richer and more vulnerable the route, the more attractive it became. In that sense, pirates were not an accident on the edge of trade. They were one of its shadows. The Spanish treasure fleets attracted raiders from across Europe. Spain's American empire moved immense wealth across the Atlantic, especially silver extracted from colonial mines. To protect it, ships often traveled in organized convoys, using schedules and guarded routes. The system was impressive, but it also created a powerful target in the imagination of Spain's enemies. Privateers, buccaneers, and pirates dreamed of intercepting vessels connected to that flow of treasure. Even when the fleets were heavily defended, nearby ports, smaller ships, and supply lines could be vulnerable. The legend of Spanish riches drew sailors into Caribbean violence for generations. It also shaped imperial rivalry. England, France, and the Netherlands all had reasons to challenge Spanish power, and sea raiding became one method of doing so. The treasure fleet system therefore helped create both protection and temptation. It concentrated wealth in ways that demanded defense, while proving to every ambitious raider that the ocean carried fortunes worth risking a life to seize. Silver from the Americas helped fuel pirate ambitions. The discovery and exploitation of huge silver deposits in the Americas transformed the global economy. Spanish ships carried metal that could pay armies, settle debts, purchase Asian goods, and strengthen imperial power. That flow of wealth changed the stakes of Atlantic raiding. Pirates and privateers did not need to understand every part of world finance to recognize opportunity. They saw guarded ships, wealthy ports, and a system that moved treasure across dangerous waters. Silver also had symbolic power. It represented empire in physical form, heavy enough to load into a hold and bright enough to stir dreams in every port. Yet the metal came from brutal colonial labor systems, including forced work that devastated indigenous communities. That reality sits behind the pirate legend. Raiders chased wealth that was already tied to violence before they touched it. The Silver Trail reveals a world where empire, extraction, and piracy were connected by the same ocean routes. Galleons looked powerful, but storms and reefs made them vulnerable. A Spanish galleon could seem like a floating fortress with high sides, heavy guns, and a commanding presence. Yet no ship of wood was invincible. Size could become a weakness in difficult waters. Reefs, sandbars, narrow channels, and sudden storms placed enormous strain on deep-hulled vessels. A powerful ship might survive battle but still be destroyed by bad navigation or violent weather. Heavy cargo made matters worse because a loaded vessel could respond slowly when danger appeared. Pirates understood that the sea itself could weaken even the strongest prize. They watched for damaged ships, isolated ships, and ships forced into predictable paths. A galleon's reputation might discourage attack, but its survival still depended on wind, pilot skill, and luck. This is what makes maritime history so dramatic. Human power was always negotiating with natural danger. A ship could carry imperial pride across the ocean, then vanish because hidden coral lay beneath a beautiful surface. The Spanish Main became a legendary hunting ground for raiders. The term referred to Spain's mainland territories and nearby waters around the Caribbean and northern South America. For raiders, it represented opportunity on a grand scale. Ports, shipping lanes, treasure routes, and colonial settlements created a region where wealth moved constantly. Buccaneers and privateers targeted towns, warehouses, and vessels linked to Spanish commerce. The geography helped them. Islands, bays, and passages offered places to gather information, hide ships, and strike suddenly. Over time, stories of raids along these coasts became central to the pirate imagination. The name itself began to sound like a stage for danger and fortune. Yet it was also a real place where empire pressed hard on local populations, enslaved laborers, and rival European powers. Raiders entered that world not as outsiders to violence, but as participants in it. The legend of the Spanish Main survives because it combines geography with desire. It was a map of wealth, fear, and ambition. Pirates followed trade winds that shaped Atlantic crossings. Sailing ships depended on wind patterns, and the Atlantic had rhythms that sailors learned to exploit. Trade winds helped carry vessels westward toward the Caribbean, while other routes and seasonal knowledge helped ships return across the ocean. These winds shaped commerce, empire, migration, and piracy. Raiders knew that merchant traffic would follow reliable paths, because sailing against the wrong wind could waste time, supplies, and lives. That predictability created hunting grounds. A pirate did not need to search the entire ocean blindly. He could position his vessel where geography and wind made targets likely to pass. The same invisible forces that filled a merchant's sails could guide an attacker into waiting range. This makes piracy feel less like chaos and more like environmental intelligence. The atmosphere itself helped draw lines across the sea. Sailors learned those lines through experience, and pirates turned them into opportunity. The wind was not just weather. It was part of the road. The Caribbean offered islands, channels, and hiding places everywhere. The region's geography made it especially difficult for authorities to control. Countless islands, reefs, bays, and passages created a maze where small vessels could move with ease. A pirate crew could anchor in a sheltered spot, watch a sea lane, then vanish before a heavier warship arrived. Shallow waters protected those who knew them and punished those who did not. The Caribbean also sat near valuable colonial routes, which meant targets passed through regularly. This combination of wealth and concealment made the area ideal for raiding. Local knowledge became a weapon. A sailor who understood a narrow channel or hidden anchorage could turn geography into survival. The islands also connected different imperial zones, allowing smugglers, privateers, merchants, and pirates to interact in complicated ways. Control on paper did not always mean control in practice. The Caribbean became legendary because it was not one open battlefield. It was a broken, shifting world where danger could wait behind any horizon. Barbary corsairs terrified Mediterranean shipping for centuries. In the Mediterranean and Eastern Atlantic, North African corsairs became a major maritime force long before the classic Caribbean pirate age. Operating from fortified coastal cities, they attacked ships, raided shores, and took captives for ransom or enslavement. Their activities were tied to the politics of the Ottoman world, European rivalries, and long-running conflicts across the sea. To many Christian communities along Mediterranean coasts, the threat felt immediate and personal. Watchtowers were built, coastal settlements fortified, and families feared sudden raids. Yet from the corsair perspective, these attacks were also part of warfare, economics, and local power. Captured ships could bring wealth, while captives could be exchanged, sold, or ransomed. The system was harsh, organized, and deeply rooted in the age's conflicts. Calling them pirates alone can oversimplify the story, but their reputation for terror was real. They remind us that piracy was not a Caribbean invention. It had older and broader worlds. North African corsairs operated from cities like Algiers and Tunis. These ports were not rough hideouts on the edge of history. They were organized urban centers with rulers, fortifications, markets, shipyards, diplomats, and complex connections to wider Mediterranean politics. Corsair captains sailed from them with backing that could blur the line between private profit and state power. Captured goods and prisoners entered local economies, while negotiations over ransom could involve families, religious orders, merchants, and governments. Algiers became especially famous in European imagination as a place of danger and captivity. Tunis also played an important role in corsair activity and regional trade. These cities gave sea raiders infrastructure. They could repair vessels, recruit crews, sell prizes, and operate within political systems that protected them when it served local interests. This makes the corsair world different from the image of isolated outlaws. Their power came from ports as much as ships. Behind each raid stood a city that could transform capture into money, influence, and fear. Ottoman corsairs sometimes commanded fleets larger than European squadrons. Some corsair leaders became major naval figures, not merely small-scale raiders. In the 16th century, commanders such as Hayreddin Barbarossa operated with extraordinary reach and influence. Their fleets could challenge European powers, support Ottoman strategy, and shift control across parts of the Mediterranean. This scale changes how we understand sea raiding. A corsair captain might begin as an opportunistic attacker, then rise into formal command, diplomacy, and imperial service. Ships under such leaders did not always behave like scattered criminals. They could act as organized forces within broader conflicts. European rulers feared them because they could strike commerce, threaten coasts, and alter naval balances. Their reputations blended piracy, privateering, state warfare, and legend. A single name could carry the terror of raids and the authority of an admiral. This wider world shows that maritime violence could become a ladder to power. In the right circumstances, an outlaw of the sea could become a maker of history. The Indian Ocean had pirate networks long before the Caribbean legends. Piracy in the Indian Ocean grew from ancient trade routes that linked East Africa, Arabia, India, Southeast Asia, and beyond. For centuries, monsoon winds carried merchants across this vast region with spices, textiles, precious metals, horses, porcelain, and other valuable cargo. Where trade flourished, raiders found opportunity. Local pirates, private war fleets, coastal powers, and opportunistic sailors all took part in different forms of maritime violence. This world was older and more complex than the familiar Caribbean image. It involved many languages, religions, states, and commercial systems. European pirates who later entered these waters were stepping into an ocean that already had its own traditions of risk and protection. Ports and islands could become nodes in networks of exchange, shelter, and information. The Indian Ocean story matters because it breaks the narrow frame. Pirate history was not born with the Jolly Roger. It belonged to a much older global history of ships, wealth, and danger. The Red Sea became a dangerous route for treasure ships. The Red Sea connected the Indian Ocean world with Egypt, the Mediterranean, and pilgrimage routes to holy cities. Ships moving through it could carry valuable goods, wealthy passengers, and cargo linked to long-distance trade. Its geography made the passage tense. Narrow waters, reefs, winds, and limited escape routes could increase danger. For pirates operating from nearby waters or using distant bases, the route offered tempting possibilities. A single rich capture could change a crew's fortune. The threat was not only economic. Attacks in this region could provoke powerful political and religious anger, especially when pilgrims or important merchants were harmed. European pirates who ventured into the Indian Ocean sometimes looked toward these routes because the prizes could be extraordinary. Yet the risks were also severe. A raid there could bring imperial retaliation and international scandal. The Red Sea's pirate history reveals how geography can concentrate wealth and vulnerability, turning a corridor of trade into a corridor of fear. Henry Every vanished after one of history's richest pirate captures. His greatest prize was the Ganges-Sawai, a huge Mughal treasure ship returning from the pilgrimage route to Mecca. It carried immense wealth, important passengers, and the prestige of one of the most powerful empires on Earth. When Every's crew took it in 1695, the attack caused outrage far beyond the usual world of piracy. The Mughal emperor was furious, and the English East India Company feared that its trade in India could be destroyed by the consequences. Suddenly, one pirate captain had created an international crisis. A massive hunt followed, with rewards offered and officials desperate to prove that England would punish the men responsible. Some members of the crew were caught, tried, and executed. Avery himself slipped away. That disappearance made the capture even more astonishing. He had struck one of the richest targets imaginable, shaken imperial diplomacy, and then stepped out of history before the law could close its hand around him. Avery's disappearance made him one of piracy's greatest mysteries. After the great manhunt began, the trail of the pirate captain fractured into rumor. Some stories claimed he reached Ireland. Others placed him in England, living quietly under another name. A few suggested he died poor after being cheated by merchants who knew he could not safely complain. There were even wild tales that he founded a pirate kingdom, married into royalty, or ruled somewhere beyond ordinary maps. The truth is far less certain and more haunting. A man who had become notorious across oceans simply faded into uncertainty. That mystery helped his legend grow larger than his record. If he had been captured, his life would have ended in a courtroom or on a scaffold, like so many others. Instead, absence became part of the story. People could imagine any ending they wished. Avery became the pirate who may have escaped the age that created him. His vanished footsteps left history with a question it still cannot answer. William Kidd's buried treasure legend outlived his actual crimes. The enduring myth around Kidd is stronger than the complicated legal case that destroyed him. His name became attached to secret hoards, hidden islands, and coded clues, even though his real story involved commissions, disputed captures, political embarrassment, and a trial shaped by powerful interests. The treasure legend grew because it offered something simpler and more exciting than legal ambiguity. A condemned captain had hidden wealth somewhere, and the world might still be able to find it. That idea was irresistible. Writers, treasure hunters, and storytellers kept returning to him because he seemed to stand at the perfect crossing point between fact and fantasy. He really had sailed with official papers. He really had captured a valuable ship. He really had concealed some goods before surrendering. From those truths, imagination built a much larger structure. Over time, the question of guilt became less famous than the possibility of discovery. Kidd's legend survived because buried treasure is easier to chase than justice. Captain Kidd left real valuables on Gardiner's Island. Before facing the authorities, Kidd placed a cache of goods on an island off the coast of New York. This was not a fictional map or a campfire invention. It was a real deposit that encoded precious items connected to his disputed voyage. He may have hoped it would help him negotiate, prove something about his intentions, or give powerful people a reason to protect him. Instead, it became part of the evidence surrounding his downfall. The cache was recovered, recorded, and woven into the larger story of his trial. That makes it unusually important in pirate history. Here was a real moment where hidden pirate wealth existed, but not in the romantic form later stories imagined. It was political, desperate, and practical. Kidd was not burying a fortune for future adventurers. He was a man under threat, trying to manage danger with the few tools left to him. The island cache gave legend a spark of truth. Oak Island legends grew from dreams of hidden pirate treasure. Few treasure stories have gripped imaginations like the mystery of Oak Island. For generations, searchers have believed that something extraordinary lies buried beneath its soil. Theories have connected the site to pirates, secret societies, royal treasure, ancient manuscripts, and almost anything else that can stir curiosity. Pirate treasure became one of the most durable possibilities because it fits the setting so well. A remote island, strange underground workings, and the hope of a hidden vault seem made for maritime legend. Yet the deeper people dug, the more the mystery seemed to multiply. Flooded shafts, uncertain evidence, collapsed excavations, and competing explanations turned the search itself into the story. Whether pirates had anything to do with Oak Island remains unproven. That uncertainty is part of its power. It shows how deeply the treasure myth has shaped modern imagination. A rumor can become a lifetime's work, and a hole in the ground can become a doorway into obsession. Blackbeard's final battle became more famous than his plunder. The end came near Ocracoke, where Lieutenant Robert Maynard led a force to hunt him down. The fight was close, brutal, and dramatic enough to overshadow much of what came before it. Blackbeard's crew faced attackers in shallow waters where ship handling mattered as much as courage. Maynard used deception by keeping many of his men hidden below deck, which made his vessel appear weaker than it was. When the pirates boarded, the trap closed. The clash became hand-to-hand, with pistols, blades, smoke, and confusion filling the deck. Accounts later claimed Blackbeard received multiple wounds before he fell. His severed head was displayed as proof that the terror was over. The story had every element needed for legend. A feared captain, a dangerous coast, a clever opponent, and a violent finish. His stolen wealth mattered less to memory than the image of his last stand. Death completed the character he had built. Black Sam Bellamy was called the Prince of Pirates. Samuel Bellamy's reputation was unusual because he became remembered not only as successful, but as strangely charismatic. He was young, bold, and associated with speeches that portrayed piracy as a rebellion against greedy elites. Whether those words were recorded perfectly or shaped by later writers, they helped create an image of a pirate with a cause. Bellamy operated during the Golden Age and rose quickly, capturing valuable ships in a career that lasted only about a year. His flagship, the Wider, had been a slave ship before pirates took it and converted it for their own use. That dark origin gives his story a powerful historical weight. Bellamy's legend also includes romance, with tales connecting him to a young woman in New England. Then, at the height of fortune, disaster struck. He died in a storm before he could enjoy lasting power. The nickname suggests elegance and nobility, but his story remains edged with tragedy. Bellamy's shipwreck preserved rare evidence of Golden Age piracy. When the Wider went down near Cape Cod in 1717, it carried pirates, weapons, treasure, tools, and the remains of a violent Atlantic world. Most pirate ships vanished through burning, sinking, decay, or reuse. This wreck was different because it left behind a concentrated archaeological record. The storm that destroyed it also sealed part of its story beneath the sea floor. Centuries later, recovered objects helped historians move beyond rumor and printed legend. Coins, cannon, rigging pieces, everyday tools, and personal items revealed a working vessel rather than a fantasy ship. The wreck also connected piracy to the slave trade because the Wider had begun its life in that brutal commerce before capture. That single fact complicates every romantic image attached to it. The site preserves both pirate ambition and the larger violence of the Atlantic. Through the wreck, Bellamy's world becomes physical. You are no longer only hearing stories. You are touching evidence. The Wider is the only confirmed Golden Age pirate shipwreck. Its importance comes from certainty. Many wrecks have been claimed as pirate vessels, and some may truly be connected to famous raiders. But the Wider stands apart because the identification is firmly tied to historical evidence and recovered material. That makes it priceless for understanding the early 18th century pirate world. Instead of depending only on trial testimony or sensational accounts, researchers can study objects that were actually aboard. The ship's remains help reveal how pirates armed themselves, what they carried, how they modified vessels, and how ordinary life mixed with extraordinary danger. It also reminds us how rare such evidence is. The sea destroys wood, scatters cargo, and buries answers under shifting sand. Even when wreckage survives, proving identity can be difficult. The wider gives history something unusually solid. It is a named ship from the height of piracy, lost at a known moment, carrying the material traces of people whose lives usually survive only through accusation. Some pirate wrecks are still hidden beneath shifting sand. The ocean is an expert at keeping secrets. A ship can sink in a storm, break apart on a reef, and then disappear under sand, coral, mud, or seagrass. Even when people know roughly where a vessel was lost, centuries of currents can scatter the evidence across a wide area. Wood rots, iron corrodes. Storms uncover objects for a season, then bury them again. This means some pirate wrecks may still exist without anyone recognizing them. A cannon might lie under a reef. A coin might rest inside a pocket of sediment. A ship's bell, if it survived, could change an entire investigation. The difficulty is not only finding wrecks, but identifying them. Many vessels carried similar tools, weapons, and cargo. Archaeologists need patterns, context, and patience. The hidden wrecks matter because each one could correct the legends. Beneath ordinary water may lie the proof of a voyage that has become only a rumor. Underwater archaeology has changed what historians know about pirates. For a long time, pirate history depended heavily on hostile reports, trial records, official notices, and dramatic books written for eager readers. Underwater archaeology adds another kind of witness. A wreck does not flatter, exaggerate, or defend itself. It preserves objects where people used them, lost them, or died beside them. Cannon placement can reveal fighting strategy. Hull remains can show how a vessel was built or altered. Personal items can suggest the varied lives aboard. Trade goods can connect a ship to global commerce. Even small finds, like buttons or eating utensils, help restore the ordinary texture of pirate life. This evidence often makes the past less theatrical but more interesting. It shows pirates as working sailors, not only symbols. It also exposes connections to slavery, empire, and legitimate trade that stories often avoid. Beneath the water, legend becomes material. The sea floor does not remove mystery, but it gives historians something firmer to hold. Pirate legends grew stronger through ballads, newspapers, and courtroom stories. The fame of pirates did not spread by sailing alone. It traveled through words. A captured crew could become news in a port city. A trial could turn testimony into public drama. A ballad could simplify a life into a catchy warning or thrilling tale. Newspapers loved danger, especially when it involved exotic seas, stolen wealth, or a violent execution. These forms did not merely report piracy, they shaped it. A captain's reputation could become larger, darker, or more theatrical as the story moved from witness to printer to reader. Details were selected for impact. Moral lessons were added. Villains became more villainous, and daring escapes became more dazzling. This process helped create the pirate world most people inherited. The legend was built by communication as much as by combat. Each retelling gave piracy a stronger outline in the public imagination. By the time later fiction arrived, the raw material was already charged with drama. Trial records preserve many pirate voices from the past. Courtrooms were meant to condemn pirates, but they also captured fragments of their lives. When accused sailors stood before judges, they gave names, origins, excuses, grievances, and descriptions of events. Some claimed they had been forced to join. Others described shipboard rules, divisions of plunder, captures, quarrels, and voyages. Officials recorded these proceedings for legal purposes, not for sympathy. Yet the result is invaluable. Through trials, historians can hear rough echoes of people who rarely left diaries or letters. The voices are not pure, because fear and self-preservation shaped what defendants said. A man facing death had every reason to minimize guilt. Still, the records preserve details that might otherwise have vanished completely. They reveal the social world of sailors, the pressures of recruitment, and the way piracy was explained by those accused of living it. In a strange way, the law that tried to silence pirates helped carry their words into the future. Pirates often became famous only after they were captured. Many pirate lives were obscure while they were happening. A captain might be feared in a region, known to merchants or hunted by officials, yet remain unknown to the wider public. Capture changed that. Once a pirate was brought to trial, his name could enter newspapers, pamphlets, official correspondence, and public conversation. The courtroom turned scattered raids into a narrative. The execution, if it came, gave the story an ending. People who had never seen the sea could suddenly read about the accused man's crimes, speeches, companions, and supposed character. This created a strange path to fame. The pirate lost freedom, but gained a place in memory. Authorities intended this publicity as a warning. They wanted the public to see crime punished. Instead, the same attention sometimes made the criminal unforgettable. A life at sea became a printed story. The gallows tried to end the legend, but often gave it the clearest shape. Public executions turned captured pirates into warnings and legends. Hangings were public theatre as well as punishment. Authorities wanted crowds to gather, watch, and understand the cost of piracy. The condemned might be brought through streets, placed before spectators, and given a chance to speak before death. Religious officials urged repentance. Officials emphasized law and order. The body itself could become part of the message, especially when displayed near the waterfront as a warning to sailors entering port. Yet public punishment could produce an unintended effect. Crowds remembered the names. Last words were repeated. Pamphlets described the scene. A pirate who might have disappeared into prison records instead became a dramatic figure in a shared story. Fear and fascination mingled. The state wanted to show control over the sea's outlaws, but the spectacle made those outlaws visible. Execution transformed crime into memory. It marked the pirate as defeated, while also giving the legend a final, unforgettable image. Pirate biographies mixed real testimony with exaggeration and drama. Early accounts of pirate lives often blended fact with storytelling. Writers drew from trial records, sailor gossip, official reports, and imagination. They knew readers wanted danger, strange characters, moral lessons, and shocking scenes. As a result, these biographies preserved valuable information while also shaping pirates into larger-than-life figures. A real event might be sharpened for drama. A speech might be polished until it sounded more theatrical than natural. A captain's habits could become symbols of his entire character. This makes such sources both useful and risky. They are part history and part performance. Without them, many pirate stories would be far thinner. With them, the line between evidence and invention becomes difficult to see. Their influence was enormous because later novels, plays, and films drew from the images they created. The pirate of popular culture was born partly in these pages, where court evidence met entertainment and never fully separated again. The book about famous pirates shaped centuries of imagination. A general history of the pirates became one of the most influential works ever written about sea raiders. Published in the early 18th century, It collected stories of figures such as Blackbeard, Roberts, Bonny, Reed, and others who would become central to pirate memory. Its author remains debated, which adds another layer of intrigue. The book mattered because it arrived close enough to the events to feel authoritative, yet it used a lively style that made the stories irresistible. It gave readers personalities, flags, speeches, crimes, and endings. Later generations returned to it again and again, borrowing details that became standard parts of pirate lore. Some material may be accurate. Some may be embellished. The influence is undeniable. It helped turn recent criminals into enduring characters. Without that book, many pirates might have remained scattered names in legal archives. Instead, they entered a shared imagination that still shapes how the world pictures piracy today. Long John Silver changed how the world imagined pirates. Robert Louis Stevenson's fictional sailor did not merely entertain readers. He helped define what a pirate should feel like in popular culture. Silver was clever, charming, dangerous, disabled, funny, and frightening all at once. He could smile while plotting betrayal, speak kindly while hiding calculation, and command loyalty through personality rather than brute force alone. That complexity made him unforgettable. Treasure Island gave the world a version of piracy filled with maps, secret hoards, sea songs, mutiny, and morally slippery characters. Silver stood at the center of it. He was not a simple monster. He was persuasive enough that readers could understand why others followed him. Many later pirate portrayals borrowed from his mixture of menace and charisma. Even people who have never read the novel know the type he helped create. Through one fictional character, the pirate became less a historical criminal and more a theatrical figure of danger, wit, and temptation. Parrots and peg legs became popular through fiction, not fact. Modern pirate imagery often feels ancient, but much of it comes from stories rather than common historical reality. The parrot on the shoulder owes a great deal to adventure fiction, where exotic animals helped signal distant seas and unusual lives. Peg legs existed in the wider maritime world because sailors could lose limbs, but they were not a standard pirate uniform. Fiction gathered such details and turned them into recognizable shorthand. A single glance could tell an audience that a character belonged to the pirate world. This is how costume language works. It condenses complicated history into a few memorable signs. Real pirates would have looked far more varied, with clothing shaped by weather, stolen goods, work, poverty, and personal taste. Some may have worn bright garments when they could get them. Others looked like ordinary sailors. The familiar outfit became powerful because it was simple, repeatable, and theatrical. It tells us more about imagination than daily life. Walking the plank was much rarer than pirate stories suggest. Few images are more famous than a prisoner forced to step from a board into the sea. Yet evidence for pirates commonly using this punishment is thin. It became popular because it is visually perfect. It creates suspense, cruelty, and helplessness in a single scene. Real pirates had many other ways to threaten, punish, abandon, ransom, or kill captives. A plank ritual would take time, require performance, and risk losing control of a tense situation. That does not mean it never happened in any form, but it was not the everyday practice that fiction suggests. The image grew because writers and illustrators understood its dramatic power. A person standing above open water captures the terror of piracy better than a legal record ever could. This is how legend often works. It chooses the scene that feels true, even when history offers little support. The plank survives because it turns fear into one unforgettable step. Pirates did not usually say in real history. The famous growl belongs mostly to performance, not documented pirate speech. Real pirates came from many regions and spoke in many accents, languages, and dialects. An English sailor from Bristol would not sound like a Dutch seaman, a French privateer, a West African sailor, or an Irish crewman. The single universal pirate voice is a modern invention. It became popular because audiences enjoy a sound they can instantly recognize. Once films, plays, and recordings repeated it, the accent became attached to piracy itself. The result is strange, but powerful. A made-up sound now feels historically natural to millions of people. In reality, a pirate deck would have been full of varied voices shaped by class, origin, and experience. Some speech may have been rough, nautical, or regionally distinctive, but not uniform. The mythic pirate voice shows how entertainment can overwrite complexity. It gives the past one loud accent when the truth had many. Pirate speech in films owes much to one actor's accent. Robert Newton's performance as Long John Silver in mid-20th century screen adaptations helped shape the sound people now associate with pirates. He used a strong West Country style, full of rolled sounds and hearty emphasis. The performance was vivid, memorable, and widely imitated. Audiences absorbed it as the natural voice of piracy, even though it came through one actor's theatrical choices. From there, the sound spread through cartoons, comedy, theme parks, and children's games. It became a cultural signal. Say a few rough syllables in that style, and almost anyone knows you mean pirate. That is an extraordinary example of performance shaping historical imagination. Newton did not invent every element from nothing, since many sailors did come from southwestern English ports. Still, his influence transformed a regional flavor into a global stereotype. The pirate accent people expect today is therefore less a preserved relic than a cinematic echo that never stopped bouncing. The classic pirate accent comes partly from southwest England. The West Country of England produced many sailors, privateers, fishermen, and maritime workers during the Age of Sail. Ports such as Bristol and nearby coastal communities were deeply connected to Atlantic trade. Because some famous pirates and seafarers came from that wider region, its speech patterns later became useful for portraying nautical characters. The accent's rounded sounds and strong rhythms suited the stage and screen, where clarity and personality mattered more than accuracy. Over time, that regional association grew into something much broader. It became the default voice of pirates everywhere, even though real crews were far more linguistically varied. The connection is not entirely random, but it has been greatly exaggerated by entertainment. This makes the accent a fascinating artifact. It carries a trace of real maritime history, then adds layers of theatre, repetition, and audience expectation. When people imitate pirate speech today, they are not simply copying the past. They are copying a performance tradition built from one corner of it. Modern pirate festivals celebrate legends more than documented reality. Across coastal towns and tourist destinations, people still gather in striped shirts, boots, hats, and eye patches to celebrate pirate culture. These festivals can be playful, theatrical, and full of energy. They often include mock battles, music, ships, markets, costumes, and storytelling. What they usually celebrate, however, is the imagined pirate rather than the difficult historical one. That is not necessarily a failure. Public history often begins with enjoyment. A child wearing a costume may later learn about trade routes, shipwrecks, naval law, or the harsh realities of maritime labor. Festivals keep the subject alive by turning it into a shared experience. They also show how pirates have shifted from feared criminals into symbols of adventure and mischief. The transformation is remarkable. Figures once hunted by governments are now used to promote community events and seaside tourism. The past has been softened, but not erased. Beneath the fun, real history waits for anyone curious enough to look closer. Pirate flags still appear in sports, fashion, and protest. The skull and crossbones has escaped its original maritime context. It now appears on team logos, clothing, album covers, warning labels, motorcycles, tattoos, toys, and political banners. Its meaning changes depending on where it is used. In sports, it can suggest aggression and competitive spirit. In fashion, it can feel rebellious or playful. In protest, it can signal defiance against authority. This flexibility comes from the pirate symbol's long association with danger outside the rules. People use it when they want to borrow that charge without becoming literal sea raiders. The old warning sign has become a cultural tool. It can be threatening, humorous, stylish, or nostalgic. Very few symbols travel so far from their original purpose while remaining instantly recognizable. The flag once asked sailors whether they were willing to risk death or surrender. Today, the same image can sell a shirt or rally a crowd. Its power lies in how quickly it says, "We refuse to behave." Real pirates rarely looked as polished as modern costumes suggest. The familiar costume is clean, coordinated, and designed for instant recognition. Real sea rovers lived in a harsher world. Clothing was shaped by labor, weather, theft, trade, and wear. A sailor might own patched trousers, loose shirts, waistcoats, head coverings, or coats taken from captured goods. Bright fabrics could appear if plunder provided them, but salt, sweat, sun, tar, and hard work quickly changed how garments looked. Shoes wore out. Hats were practical until they were lost. Weapons had to be carried in ways that worked on a crowded deck. A pirate preparing for action might look less like a stage villain and more like a dangerous sailor dressed from whatever the voyage had provided. This reality is more interesting than the costume because it reveals constant adaptation. Their appearance was not a uniform. It was evidence of survival, opportunity, and motion. The polished pirate belongs to entertainment. The real one was weathered by the sea. Pirate legends survive because they mix freedom with danger. The appeal is powerful because it holds two opposing ideas at once. Pirates seem to break from ordinary life, refusing masters, borders, and predictable futures. They sail into a world where the rules appear loosened and fortune can change in a single encounter. Yet that freedom is surrounded by risk. Storms, hunger, disease, betrayal, battle, capture, and execution are always near. This mixture makes the legend thrilling. Safe freedom can become ordinary. Pure danger can become unbearable. Piracy sits between them in the imagination, offering a fantasy of escape sharpened by consequence. Historically, the reality was much harsher than the dream. Still, the emotional pattern remains. People are drawn to figures who reject control, even when those figures are frightening. The pirate becomes a symbol of the life not taken, the road beyond permission, the horizon outside the map. That is why the legend never fully fades. It tempts and warns at the same time. The sea made pirates seem unreachable, mysterious, and almost mythic. Land leaves tracks, witnesses, borders, and records. The ocean erases. A ship can appear on the horizon, strike, and vanish into weather and distance. For people in coastal towns or merchant offices, that made pirates feel almost supernatural. News arrived late. Rumors changed as they traveled. A captain might be reported in one region while already sailing toward another. The sea gave outlaws scale and uncertainty. It hid their routes, softened evidence, and made pursuit difficult. Even death at sea could leave no grave. This mystery shaped the legends as much as any raid. Pirates belonged to a realm that ordinary people feared and depended on. The ocean carried wealth, food, letters, soldiers, and dreams. But it also carried threats that could not be easily contained. A pirate on land could be arrested. A pirate beyond the horizon became an idea. Distance turned criminals into shadows, and the sea made those shadows larger. Every pirate story balances rebellion, survival, greed, and fear. The most compelling accounts are never only about treasure. They're about people under pressure, making dangerous choices in a violent world. Rebellion appears when sailors reject brutal captains, unfair wages, or imperial authority. Survival appears in the constant struggle for water, food, shelter, and safety. Greed appears in the chase for cargo, money, and status. Fear appears everywhere, in the hunted, the hunters, and the communities waiting for sails on the horizon. These forces pull against one another, which is why pirate history resists simple judgment. A crew might create fair rules among themselves while terrorizing strangers. A captain might speak of liberty while stealing from people with little power. A sailor might join out of desperation, then become part of someone else's nightmare. The stories endure because they reveal human contradiction in concentrated form. Piracy did not create those motives. It placed them on a ship, surrounded them with ocean, and raised the stakes. The most powerful pirate legends are anchored in real history. The reason these stories endure is not that they are pure fantasy. It is that the fantasy grows from real events. There were actual captains who frightened governments, actual ships that vanished, actual trials that recorded desperate voices, and actual wrecks that still surrender objects from the sea floor. The truth is often stranger than the decoration added later. A woman really did command a vast pirate confederation. A young captain really did disappear after a world-shaking capture. A former slave ship really did become a pirate fight ship and sink in a storm. Fiction changed the clothing, voices, and symbols, but it did not invent the fascination from nothing. Real piracy sat at the meeting point of empire: trade, violence, poverty, ambition, and the open sea. That foundation gives the legends weight. When we strip away the theatrical details, the subject does not become smaller. It becomes more human, more troubling, and far more astonishing. And so we've reached the end of our journey through the world of pirate legends. We've followed feared captains across open water, stepped aboard crowded wooden ships, and looked beyond the familiar stories of flags, treasure, and hidden coves. We've seen how piracy grew from trade, empire, hardship, and opportunity. We've met sailors who became outlaws, leaders who became legends, and mysteries that still seem to drift just beyond the horizon. Some stories were darker than the legends suggest. Others were stranger than fiction could easily invent. The truth of piracy is not only in buried gold or dramatic battles. It is in the creak of a hull at night, the pull of a sail in changing wind, the tense silence before surrender, and the long memory of the sea. Now, let those stories begin to fade into the distance. Imagine the last ship slipping slowly beyond view, its lanterns growing smaller against the dark water. The waves settle. The shore grows still. The old names become softer now, carried away like voices across the tide. If you enjoyed this sleepy journey through history, you're welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. It helps others find their way here too. And if you happen to still be awake, there's another calm journey waiting for you on the screen. But for now, there is nothing more you need to follow. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breathing slow. Let the day release its hold, little by little. The sea is calm now. The sails are lowered, The night is wide and steady. Sleep well and good night.